Councilor Wright, I think you went to Lilac Sunday at the Arboretum.
Can you hear me? No?
Barely.
I can hear Pam, but it's very low volume.
Oh, thank you, Julia. I know my earphones work.
Recording in progress.
Okay, everybody, can we take our seats?
Can you hear me now? Faintly.
Okay, colleagues. We're starting. I'm sorry. You're deep in conversation. All right, good evening, everybody. Councillor Kalis, can I ask you to do the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic,
To the republic for which it stands,
one nation, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please be aware that this meeting is audio and video recorded. To let everybody know what counselors are on at home on Zoom, we have counselors Downs and Krinsman and Kelly and Oliver and Baker and Noel and Malachi. I think that's everybody. Okay.
And Greenberg.
And, oh, yes, and Greenberg, Councilor Greenberg. Thank you very much. All right. I will ask for a motion to go into a committee of the whole with the Finance Chair Grossman presiding. So moved by Councilor Kalis. All in favor on a voice vote say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. Acting President. We are now in the Committee of the Whole in order to start our fiscal year 2024 budget discussions and votes. We will be taking up docket numbers 1-23, 1-23 subparens 3, and 1-23 subparens 4, which are collectively the fiscal year 2024 municipal and school operating budget, the fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2028 capital improvement plan, and the supplemental capital improvement plan. In addition, I just want to take a moment to go over the process for this evening and for this week. Because we have a bunch of resolutions that we want to get to the mayor tonight in hopes of receiving a response tomorrow, I am going to start with the departments that have resolutions attached to them. The one with the most resolutions attached to it is the school department budget. So we're going to do that first. For each department, I'm going to ask the committee chairs if they will give the report on their respective committees' budget meetings. And that includes the results of the straw vote taken in committee. And then for each resolution, I will ask one of the proponents for the resolution to please be prepared to offer it and describe it for us. If we have resolutions with majority support, we then hold those departments' budgets. We won't ask for a vote on those until the responses come back, which again, I hope will be by tomorrow. And as always, resolutions remain in order throughout the committee of the whole process on any department. So that is still an option if folks are interested in that. If we do vote a department tonight, if there are questions subsequent to that vote, you can certainly raise them on one of the remaining evenings or reconsider a vote that was already taken. And just a reminder that nothing is final until the entire budget is voted at our last committee of the whole, and ultimately the vote that really matters is the full council final vote at our conclusion of the committee of the whole process. So I'm going to start with the school department budget. If I could call on Chair Krinsman to please present the report, including the committee's straw vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, I'm happy to present it quickly. I'm happy to reference the two resolutions as well. The only thing I would ask is these resolutions were not presented during the committee discussion. So I wonder, I mean, I'm happy to, present them. I just wonder if I want to give the sponsors an opportunity to explain them.
You don't need to present the resolutions unless they're your own resolution. One of the proponents of each resolution should take care of that.
Okay. All right. On to the report. So the school department interim superintendent, Kathy Smith, presented the school budget to a joint meeting of the Finance and Programs and Services Committee. This was on Wednesday, May 9th. We discussed the fact that there is a significant funding challenge before the schools in light of the override failure to pass. That took up quite a bit of our time, and folks explained a little bit about how the school department and the school committee had to sort of recalibrate the budget in light of the override failing. Ultimately, 40.3 FTEs were cut compared to last year, with cuts across all levels of the schools. Superintendent Smith reminded the council that 87% of the budget is wrapped up in personnel costs. In terms of the vote on the proposed budget of $268,655,413 in programs and services, the straw vote was 2-0 to 6, and in finance it was 0-0 with 6 abstentions. And again, there are 2 resolutions. There is a resolution asking the school department to utilize the expertise of the UOD program, and there's a resolution on school transportation management.
Okay, thank you very much. The first resolution was introduced during the joint meeting of Programs and Services and Finance, and that's the resolution for schools related to the inclusion education in Newton classrooms. We did also receive a reply on that resolution. Madam Clerk, is it possible to put that resolution up? That's okay. It's the resolution for the schools related to inclusion education in Newton classrooms. And is Councillor Noel? Yes, Councillor Noel. Can I recognize you to describe this resolution, the discussion around it, and the response that we received from Superintendent Smith?
Certainly.
In this case, we've already received a reply, so this is a little unusual for our process, but go ahead, please.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. So as many of you are aware, in the FY24 budget, Understanding Our Differences, which was originally budgeted at $64,000, was eliminated from the budget. In the school committee process, through a motion, $32,000, so half of it was reinstated with no requirements, because it's outside of the school committee's authority, that Understanding Our Differences be the resource used to do disability inclusion services in our schools. So we, as a city council, I think almost everyone signed on to a resolution asking the administration, the school administration, to utilize the expertise of Understanding Our Differences, the almost 50 years of expertise, to ensure that the inclusion work in our schools was thoughtful, was built on the expertise and the commitment to this organization to ensure that the curriculum was implemented thoughtfully. We received a response from Dr. Smith, the acting superintendent, basically saying that, although UOD was respected, they were going to, merge and I apologize if I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, but that the inclusion curriculum would be given through the teachers, and it would just be blended in with the curriculum and be seamless, and everybody would feel included, and it was going to be great. And so now let's pick up where we're at. So basically, I recognize that we have very limited authority to impact what the school administration does. I do think, and I'll say this as respectfully as possible, Dr. Smith's response was a bit disingenuous in that this idea that you can just magically blend disability services into the curriculum or give yet the teachers another responsibility. So I think that the response from the committee was unsatisfactory. And if you'll indulge me for just a few more minutes, I know that I'm aware of our limited role as a city council, but I do think it's worth stating that we have a very limited authority as a city council, but I did feel this was an appropriate mechanism to take up, because the way in which this program, this almost 50-year program, was eliminated was through the budget process. And I do consider this act of eliminating Understanding Our Differences irresponsible and disrespectful to our community members who have disabilities, and disrespectful to the children we have coming up in the school system who are going to miss out on this opportunity to experience this curriculum. I also think that this doesn't align with the values, the purported values that our city continually states about our commitment to diversity and inclusion. And finally, I will say that I do believe what's most frustrating about what has happened with Understanding Our Differences and this process has been the lack of transparency. That initially, the cluster of folks, the counselors that I met with the mayor was very clear that the elimination wasn't budget related, it was content, that there was frustration with UOD's content. I then had a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Smith. She assured me it wasn't content, that it was budget. And the other piece that, as I was in conversations with the executive director and the board members of Understanding Our Differences, they were completely broadsided by this. So I think the process was lousy. I think this is a super irresponsible, disrespectful, and missed opportunity. And again, although I understand our role is limited, it may be meaningless, I'll be voting against the school committee purely based on this decision. I think it's incredibly poor. And as you can tell, I'm very frustrated with it.
Thank you. We did have a vote on this resolution. Obviously, we have a large number of counselors who are signed on to this resolution. As I said, this is a little unusual because we've already received the reply from the authority in this matter who's able to give us a reply. So there is no additional formal action to take on this resolution. We can certainly, have a vote if folks like, but, we're not going to have any further reply or anticipated further discussion after tonight. So let me just take one moment. Are there any comments or questions on this resolution that folks want to make? Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Councilor Noel for her leadership on this and for her articulation of this resolution, and I totally share her frustration. And I would be open to meeting to discuss other options for funding. I think Understanding Our Differences has been a critical component of our schools for many years. My friend Carol Beard would be rolling in her grave right now. And so I'm very disappointed about the response. I understand our very tight budget. So let's look for alternatives to get some of that funding other than city funds. I'd be open to working on that. Thank you.
Councilor Noel, let me just turn to you. Is your preference to have an additional vote on the resolution tonight, or?
My preference tonight is that we be judicious with our time and not waste it. So if it's a meaningless vote, then no. I will also say that to Councilor Leary's point, UOD has been very aggressively fundraising. They can find the additional $32,000, but just to be clear, they're not invited into the Newton Public Schools. They've been uninvited. So we can close this if there's no other comments, because there's no point in wasting our time. I think I've been clear. I think the counselors that signed on to this share some of my frustration, and we can move on.
Okay. Councilor Crossley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Noel, I completely agree that we should move on. However, I think the only course forward for the council, given our limited authority, is to put together a docket item before Programs and Services requesting members of the school department and school committee. I believe the school committee was not unanimously thrilled with this idea either, to understand specifically, once we have a new superintendent coming in, whether understanding our differences is going to have a seat at the table planning the new curriculum. Because I think that was part of the acting superintendent's letter, basically that she doesn't have control from this point forward. The new superintendent will, but I think we need to make our position clear when the new superintendent comes in, and I believe that there would be many parents in the community who will also want to make their position clear, who will be missing this program. Thank you.
Councillor Gentile.
So we're committee of the whole, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to sit. I'm sitting. We don't have to get up in committee of the whole. That's why I was at it. So I hear you. I apologize. I don't have the resolution in front of me, and I haven't followed it as closely as some others have. But I understand what Councilor Noel says is that our role when it comes to the schools is always a challenge, that we're not quite sure where that line is. But that doesn't mean, I know what we can do officially and what we can't do, but that doesn't mean that we can't take actions that we feel are in the best interest of the school system and the students. So if you think that you want to send a message, and this is the first I heard that understanding our differences has been uninvited in the school. I wasn't aware of that. But if you believe that the program is very valuable, and I think that it is, then you could, the council could pass a resolution to add, I guess it's $32,000 or something, back to the school department's budget for this express purpose of continuing this program, and then see what happens. But there's nothing wrong with us, being on record that we think that is the right thing to do.
So I appreciate that, Councillor Gentile. The resolution was already taken up, discussed, and voted in the joint meeting of Finance and Programs and Services with overwhelming support. And we discussed also the responding authority, and since it is a curriculum matter, it was determined that responding authority is the acting superintendent. And rather than wait for a second vote tonight, the acting superintendent already considered the resolution, which is as you described it, and already replied to the negative with her response, which is in our email. So that's essentially the point. We can have another vote here right now. There's no problem with that. But the reply that's going to come back tomorrow is the same reply.
But our vote would be to the mayor. And the mayor.
It's not to the mayor, because the mayor is not.
But our vote is, my suggestion is that we would vote to ask the mayor to find the money to put into the school department's budget for that specific purpose. And then it's in the mayor's hands to do what she wants.
So that's how it started. And the mayor's reply was, the school allocation is the school allocation. The school committee doesn't have curriculum authority over the curriculum. The superintendent does, and the reply will come from the superintendent. And that's why we're here. I'm happy to take another vote. Let's just take it and move on. That's fine, but the point is we have our answer. So if somebody wants a motion for a vote of all of us right now, that's fine. Let's do it.
I'll move to vote.
Okay. Motion to vote on the resolution. Is there further discussion on the resolution? Okay. Seeing none, I think we can do this on a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Madam Mayor and team, you are we invite you to reply further tomorrow. We also have the superintendent's letter and happy to hear what folks come back with tomorrow. Let's go on to the second resolution, which is regarding our school transportation management. And I'm just going to give a heads up because I know that the resolutions that are on our packet weren't assigned to departments, so I want to make sure that everybody knows what's coming next. So after this one, Councilor Gentile, I'm going to come to you for the resolution about the free cash designation from $1.5 million to $2.1 million. So you're on deck. Okay? All right. So Councilor Bowman, let me recognize you to introduce the resolution regarding school transportation management.
Thank you very much. So this resolution is regarding calling on the mayor to form a task force to review school transportation. It was signed on, I won't read everybody's names, 21 counselors, in recognizing the important role school transportation plays in meeting citywide transportation, climate, and equity goals. We're requesting that the mayor fund a strategic study of strategic transportation in coordination with the Newton Public Schools and transportation staff from planning and DPW. Transportation is a big line item in the school budget, running about $8.6 million. 5.5 million of that is associated with special education transportation and 3.1 with the yellow school bus. We should be concerned that special education costs have risen almost, special education transportation costs have risen almost 20% this year. And the yellow school bus transportation, I think 3.5%. This year, there was a reinstatement of the bus fees at elementary school level, which I think we can expect that will mean a drop in people taking the bus at the elementary school level. Which will be a concern because traffic at our kids who qualify to take the bus, if they're not on the bus, means they're probably being driven. So traffic around especially around our elementary schools, is big. It's also it's a line item of fee. This increase is increasing the fees coming to the school by over $300,000. I think we need better decisions. We really do need to analyze our routes for opportunities to increase the bus ridership, and to better serve students and make sure we're hearing reports of some students who are on buses for almost an hour. We need to improve the information that's available to students and parents as far as what the bus routes are and where particular buses are. I think we need to better understand fees and their impact on ridership. It's tough to have an understanding that it might be less expensive for your children to drive and park at school than it is to take the bus, especially if you can coordinate two of them coming together. To serve our climate goals and for the health of our students, we really need to transition to electric school buses and vans. But there's so many hurdles associated with that can't necessarily be solved. I've been working on this for nearly 2 years. Can't be solved just by the schools themselves. There are a lot of elements that overlay with the city. And so we need a good plan for that. And I think that it's worthwhile that we analyze savings and improved service possibilities of insourcing. We haven't had a competitive, and it's not just Newton, across the state, there hasn't been a competitive bidding process for the school bus contracts. Contract after contract goes and with only one response. And we have issues such as we don't own property that we've allowed school bus storage in Newton, so that significantly increases the cost of our contract and makes it difficult for us to transition to electric school buses. And then lastly, I think, understanding what's the best way to structure the management and who's paying for it. It's really hard for me to think that that we look to school transportation as a way to increase fees to pay for teachers. And we should be making the best decisions for school transportation that are going to take cars off the road and ensure children are getting to school safely. Not everybody can live next door to their school. And that should be separate from how many teachers we need in the classroom. So so I'm hoping that we'll be prepared to do this. And buses also, lastly, I'll just say, I put this in the link, that especially the transition to electric buses, it's not only that it's better for the environment, it actually provides a lot of stability to our electric system. They can be used to feed the grid at peak periods, as well as provide power during emergency. If we were to lose power in Newton because of an extended storm, we could have electric school buses providing power to emergency centers. So there are a lot of reasons why we, sort of cool reasons why it would be good for us to do this as well beyond that. But, and most recently, Worcester insourced their buses and is actually saving significant money. I understand they're a much bigger school system, but I think that it's been a long time since we've outsourced them, and I think that it makes sense for us to do a study of that.
Okay, thank you. So we obviously, as Councillor Bowman pointed out, have 21 members of the council who've signed on to this. So I think we know where this particular vote is headed. Do we have further comments or questions on this resolution? Do we have Councillor Lucas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor Bowman for writing this resolution. It's very thorough. There's a lot of stuff in there. I did not sign on to this. I was one of the few who did not sign on to this resolution, and we don't have it in front of us. I have it in front of me right here. There was just one thing in it, and I'm not asking to make any changes at all to it, but there was one thing in it that was the reason why I didn't sign on to it. And it was fund, F-U-N-D, fund, to fund this study. And, money is tight. I think everyone wants money for a certain project or a certain study, this, that, the other. Money is tight now. And that was the one reason why I couldn't sign on to this, but it's a well-written resolution. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of good stuff in here. And I don't think it's appropriate to ask to fund this study at this point in time right now. So I don't think I've ever voted against a resolution, although someone might want to double check that, but I don't think I have. And I'm not going to start now, so I will abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. So I'll remind Council Lucas that this budget item is $8.6 million, including almost $1 million in fees being collected from families. So if we're talking about funding a study that, $250,000 to $300,000 that could have huge savings of, 10 times that, I think that it's, a worthwhile thing to take into account. Thank you.
Councillor Kalis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I wanted to thank Councillor Bowman for putting this together. I think the only criticism I'd give is she's too respectful of the administration. I find the bus fees an abomination, and I'm very disturbed by the fact that you can park at the school for less money than taking the bus or equal. That is just counter to everything we're trying to do here. So I would move this item if we can.
Okay, motion to approve. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you. Before everybody makes up their mind, it's quite possible that our own planning department and our transportation director can put mind to matter here. And I don't know how much this kind of study would cost, but I think the first thing to ask ourselves, is it a good idea? And you know, it may be that there's grant money available for something like this, or it may be just by understanding the numbers and the potential for savings, looking a little bit at what some other communities are doing is something that staff can begin. And I think it's at least worth a response from the administration before we vote against a resolution. So, you okay?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I followed your train of thought at the end, so we're good.
Okay, you looked very, yeah.
No,
okay. So I
just
just wanted to make sure I was making sense.
You did.
All right, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I was very excited about this when we were discussing it and having it done. As we remember from last year's budget discussions, the school transportation, the buses themselves, and the parking were a big topic of conversation. And here again, we're talking about it, and I hope we continue to talk about it. I'm a counselor who strongly thinks that the buses should be out of the school budget and in the transportation budget, under the transportation department in the city. And school budget money is for schools and teachers. So let's keep talking about this and see what we get. But I hope eventually we get to the point where the school buses and everything that goes with it are no longer in the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other comments or questions? Otherwise, we do have a motion on the table before us. Okay, seeing none, I think we can probably do a voice vote here too. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have one abstention. What's our total number of counselors here right now? So we have 21 in favor, none opposed, one abstention? Okay, so that'll be submitted to the mayor this evening. Our next resolution is a resolution requesting a free cash designation, and this one was filed by Councillor Gentile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a rather long history now of using a certain amount of cash, free cash, to support the fiscal year operating budget. The number varies from year to year, with $1.5 million being on the lower amount when you look at the history. There's been a lot of talk about the request to use $10 million in cash to help support the building project at Lincoln Elliott as opposed to bonding the money. And the reason that I was given is that we could save $600,000 if we did not bond the $20 million this coming January, if we would only bond 10 of the 20 that they plan on raising for Lincoln Elliott next fiscal year. And so therefore, that was the main reason that was explained to me when I talked to the administration as to why they wanted to spend that amount of cash instead of bonding. So I understand the importance of the $600,000 so that we're not rushing through this whole discussion of making sure that the school department has the money that it needs and is able to plan. My suggestion is to increase the allocation from $1.5 million to $2.1 million with the specific intention that the reason we're doing that is to support the public schools operating budget. And that was it remains the reason why I docketed this item.
Thank you. Do we have further discussion on this item? Any comments or questions or a motion on this item?
I'll move approval.
Okay, motion to approve by Counselor Gentile. Counselor Crossley.
I didn't think I should be the first person to speak on this, but my understanding is that the schools need the $600,000 every year. And so that this resolution would only work if you're rejecting the mayor's funding plan. And on the one hand, and if it goes along with another resolution, which is about taking that $10 million instead and perhaps other money and investing it and counting on the interest, which we've been talking about, can I say ad nauseum, in many committees and many forums. So I personally don't want to appear as though I'm suggesting that the schools don't need the $600,000. Of course they do. But I plan to support the mayor's funding plan of many parts. I do believe it makes sense and will achieve the objectives we have all asked for with respect to both the $600,000 toward the school operating budget and the approximately $600,000 that will be freed up, on the other hand, another part of the plan for constructing the Horace Mann School. So therefore, it's a complicated explanation for why at this moment I can't independently support this resolution.
So you bring up an important point. I was debating bringing up both resolutions together. One of the reasons I didn't is the other resolution isn't specifically tied to the school department. We can take it up, and I mean, there's no rule against taking it up and talking about it together. The other reason is I support this resolution no matter what, because I think the schools deserve another $600,000, whether you like the other plan or not. I want to see kindergarten aides restored. I want to see middle school teachers restored. Well more than $600,000 is still missing from the school budget, regardless of how folks feel about the other resolution. But I now have a whole bunch of hands. So let me let Counselor Gentile respond quickly. And then I saw, Counselor Bowman, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw you. No, okay. So I have Counselor Humphrey and then Markowitz. But Counselor Gentile, you can respond first.
So I understand the concern or the question that Councilor Crossley is raising, because this year it's been a little different and it's been a little confusing to me, where we have all this linkage all of a sudden. You know, we're cutting Medicare Part B reimbursement because we need the money for the Horace Mann School. Instead of funding the, Lincoln Elliott project like we typically do with bonds, we're going to use $10 million in free cash so that we can come up with $600,000 for the schools. I don't remember any mayor, and there've been a couple of other things. I don't remember any mayor making those kinds of links, and I don't think that it's a good practice myself. So personally, you can't guarantee anything for 30 years. I think you need to look at it a little bit more 1 year at a time. Now, I'm not suggesting that you use $10 million, for instance, to support the operating budget and the school department in particular, because I think that's too much money for recurring expenses. But look at it this way, and this will support what the chair is saying. In a year where you've had $28.5 million certified in free cash, adding another $600,000 to the amount of free cash you're going to use to support next year's budget, I don't think that's a radical move at all. I think it's a good move that we can do, especially where we're saying that it should go to the schools. So I would suggest that you look at it that way and keep it a little simpler.
Counselor Humphrey and then Markowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what you actually just said a few minutes ago. Essentially, the plain text of the resolution doesn't have to do with any of the other resolutions, and those aren't before us, so I think they can be considered separately. And on the merits, it's fine to say that the allocation should be $600,000 higher. And not only is it fine abstractly, but more specifically, the money that typically would have been allocated to OPEB on the school side got moved for the first time to the city side this year, and that was that amount of money. And therefore, the allocation, although nothing was theoretically cut because they just moved the budgetary responsibility for the item, that meant that in practice, the allocation was lower in terms of a percentage increase than it would have been. It would have been around 3.75, and then it ended up being lower as a result of that. So to my mind, it's fine to say, hey, the base allocation should be increased by $600,000, and I agree with what Councilor Gentile just said, which is that in the grand scheme of things, that's a relatively small amount of money. Now, I'm not going to change my mind on the other matters that we'll be taking up later, but in terms of the plain text of this particular resolution, I think it's perfectly fine to say that this should happen, which doesn't mean it's going to, but we can vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Markowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think all of you, one way or another, are right and consistent, and we're getting to the same place. It's harmless for us to say this, for us to support this. I think we all agree they need the money, and I'll offer you this. Regardless of where we wind up on the $10 million, whether we allow the mayor to go ahead and buy down the initial offering by $10 million, or we keep the $10 million, we certainly have $600,000 one way or the other to fund this. So it stands on both those legs as well. So again, I support it. I think it's fine.
Okay, so we had a motion to approve by Councilor Gentile. I don't see any other hands at this time. Seeing no other hands, I think we should call for a vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's 22 to 0 on that resolution. That will be submitted tonight. Those are the resolutions for the school department. I realized that I never took a moment to ask you all if you had any general questions or comments on the school department's budget overall after the chair introduced it and went over the votes. So let's just take a moment quickly. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the school department budget before I ask for a motion to hold that budget for the night? Okay, I don't see any. So is there a motion to hold the school department budget?
Hold.
Okay, motion to hold by Councilor Krinsman. All those in favor of hold, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's held. We'll submit those resolutions. We will get, hopefully, our replies by tomorrow. So just to go over the remaining resolutions, because they are a little different than our typical resolutions. They're a little less specifically tied to departments, and I want to just check in with the proponents of each and make sure I have it assigned to the right department. So we've got the resolution requesting supporting information for personnel changes. And I approached Councilor Lucas quickly. I was going to take this up with the HR department budget, if that's okay. And then our remaining two resolutions, we have a resolution requesting the establishment of an unrestricted reserve fund. And then we have the resolution regarding Medicare Part B, both by Councilor Gentile. I was going to take those up with the comptroller budget. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So I'm going to take up the HR department first, and then we'll do the comptroller's budget next with your two resolutions. So first, let us go to the Human Resources Department. And Councilor Kalis, if I could ask you to give that report, please.
Oh, Human Resource, okay. Sure thing. So we were joined by Michelle Pizzi O'Brien. She introduced her Deputy Director, Francois Charlot, who introduced herself. And she was very impressive. they have many goals, but 2 focus areas. The focus areas were benefits administration and recruitment. Michelle talked about how pleased she was with her team and her partnership with the Newton Public School HR team, gave an overview of the partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and how happy she was that they were on board. Recruitment is a top priority for them now. There's a shortage of workers, as she's discussed many times, and is focusing on challenges and implementing strategies to attract and retain employees. They're looking to private industries to learn how to recruit in different ways, look at innovative ways of marketing the city to potential employees. There were a few questions asked, one about the competitiveness of salaries, about the vacancies or size of the HR team, and the potential of partnering with institutions of higher learning in the city to take reduced cost classes for employees. There was a straw vote, which was unanimously approved 8-0 with a budget of $1,203,337.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lucas, if I could recognize you to please introduce the resolution requesting supporting information for personnel changes. Madam Clerk, if we could put that on the screen, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with this resolution, let me just read it into the record. Councilors Lucas Oliver, Norton, Laredo Wright, Baker, Malachi, Markowitz support the following resolution. When any municipal department, other than the school department, wants to add or subtract personnel based upon the previous year's budget, the administration shall identify the positions and provide a brief job description in their respective operational budgets. Additionally, requesting that changes in staff are accompanied by some explanation of the changes, including the reasons for the changes in personnel. So I actually thought of this, not this year, but last year after the budget, when I was just going through the budget book, and I would see that we would have been adding or subtracting full-time or part-time personnel from the budget, and it was in the book, and you could clearly see that we were adding or subtracting personnel. And at last year's budget, I can't remember which ones it were I was at, but I would ask the question to the department head during our budget meetings, why are we having changes in personnel? What positions are we adding? What positions are we losing? And I did that again this year. I did it with planning and the police department. And just for example, the police department budget this year, in our budget book, they're going from 55 part-time employees to 57. And I asked Superintendent McMains, Chief Carmichael was absent, and I asked Superintendent McMains what were the reasons for the changes in personnel, and he could not provide an answer. Ms. Lemieux was on the call, and she was able to provide an answer. And the answer was, we are adding 2 part-time dispatchers. These are, they were former employees, and they are now working part-time. We have brought them back just to plug in some holes, because they are apparently down a couple of people. I also asked the planning department, Director Heath, about their changes in personnel. They are adding 1 part-time position. Again, it is not highlighted in the budget book what the position actually is. The position is Nicole Friedman, who, if we remember, she left Newton last year, or so we thought she left Newton last year, but she's still here on a part-time basis as a transportation coordinator. And in our in our zoning and planning budget committee report, it says what she's actually going to be doing. She's going to be working on grants and securing money for grants. So I just feel as though that information should be in the budget book. We know the school department, in their budget book, I don't have it on me right now, I think I left it at home, they provide a very detailed breakdown of their personnel whenever they add or subtract it, and they provide a reason for it, and that is missing in our budget book. So that is why I have proposed this resolution before this council that we ask that the administration provide the information to us in the budget books, put it in writing, so we can see it, this year and next year and so on. So that's all I have for right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I think you just clarified at the end what my question was, which is this resolution is specifically requesting information in each budget book once per year. Within each department, but in the budget.
Yes, that's right. Yes, in each department in our budget book. Yes.
Okay, because when I first read this, I thought it was speaking more to if there are changes over the course of the year that don't align with what's in the budget book, asking for notification, but that's not it. You're looking for a written explanation in the budget book about personnel changes. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Humphrey, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarifying question to the sponsor. What is specifically being requested beyond the Section 9 of the budget book, the personal FTE summary by department that has all the notes on which positions were eliminated, deferred, changed, transferred? I assume you are asking for something beyond that. I'm just asking for clarity on what further.
Well, I used two as an example, the police and planning, and it doesn't actually say it in the budget book what positions are being added. So if they could provide in the budget book, I'll leave it up to each department head how they want to present it, but just say we're adding 2 part-time dispatchers who are former employees because we have some staffing issues. That's all that the ask is. That was one example. Did I answer?
Go ahead. Go ahead and continue.
The point of confusion that I'm having is that is in fact stated in Section 9 of the budget book. It says, for example, added PT dispatchers 3 at 0.49 FTE, eliminated PT traffic clerk minus 0.40, and so forth.
All right. Can I get back to him in a second?
Sure.
I think Crossley had a question. I don't want to.
Sure. Councillor Crossley?
Actually, I was going to try to clarify the same thing I think everybody's asking. It seems to me that from your description, Councillor Lucas, you're asking for a narrative description within the department's section of the budget. So for example, I'll give you another one. ISD eliminated a position, and we could see that in by the numbers, and we asked why. So, and that happens every year in different departments in our committee meetings, but you're asking for an actual sentence or two in the budget book in the forward section about why that person was eliminated. In the case of ISD, it was because the permitting system has streamlined efforts and they no longer needed someone, a second person in administration. So you're asking that next year, could that be said? Okay, I understand. Harmless, I think.
So I have 2 hands on the screen, but let me just check in with you, Councillor Lucas and Councillor Humphrey. Do you? No, go ahead. Okay. Councillor Krinsman and then Noel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, at first, when I read the resolution, I thought it was every time that the department wants to make a personnel change. So I think if this is a budget-specific request, which it sounds like it is from what everyone's saying, I think the wording should be modified to reflect that. I'm not going to wordsmith it or suggest anything, but I think we ought to reflect that. I think there is a fair amount of this detail provided in the budget book as has been articulated, but if the specific request is for a department by department breakdown within the department's budget, essentially taking information from elsewhere in the budget book that's already presented so that it's more easily digestible within the context of the department. I agree with Councillor Crossley. It's harmless. I think somewhat unnecessary, but it's harmless, and I'm fine supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Noel and then Oliver.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Councilor Krinsman said. I thought at first it was like a real-time update, but and I was kind of curious like what we were solving for, but I think if this is just an amendment to the budget book, I think it's covered through our process. So I'm not sure it's necessary.
Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. For the exact reason, I think that what I'm hearing is that, and I agree, that once we go through the process and questions are asked, the information more often than not is provided. This is just a simple way to get it in the budget book to make it clearer so that if the individual who might be representing a particular department on any given night, like Councilor Lucas's example pointed out, it's not always clear to the individual kind of that we have in front of us why those changes are being made, what the new role, assuming there is a new role, is going to be, what that person would be assigned to. I don't think it's unnecessary, nor do I think this is an onerous ask by any means. I think it's simply offered in the vein of continued and improved clarity, understanding of what's going on at within the city. That's why I sponsored this. That's why I think this is a good idea. I always think more information is better. And putting it in the budget book once a year, I think, is a pretty innocuous request. But thanks. I appreciate the opinions.
Councilor Malachy.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree with Councilor Oliver and others. The numbers that are in the headcount tables tell you the numbers, but they don't tell you the reasons. I think it is, I would say, user-friendly and public-friendly, and in the interest of transparency that we all claim to want, that we have the reasons for something as basic as a headcount change, and usually they're not very big numbers of headcount changes, so it's not a big burden to explain what's going on, but to have that in each department's narrative section, so it's kind of a history of changes that happened in city government. And the annual budget is a document that's staying up there for year after year, and it's a way to track what's been going on. So that's why I'm supporting. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking of, I'm not sure if this is necessary to do this, but I know when I was going over the budget book, we were going to be doing Parks, Rec, and Culture, and I noticed, a couple of us noticed that there was two employees added, and I called up Nicole Banks and asked her what it was, and as it turned out, she explained it during the regular meeting. It was two employees that came back to Parks, Rec, and Culture from DPW. It was about the
They were completely torn.
the insourcing of the some of the rubbish pickup at the parks and in the village centers. And then when we did the DPW budget, it came up again and it was explained again. And I just see that these things naturally come up in the hearings, so I don't know if it's necessary that they have to do that. Yeah, it would help, but I'm just not sure if it's necessary. Thanks.
Councilor Kalis.
I agree with Councilor Ryan, but I'll motion to approve.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve from Councilor Kalis. Do we have further discussion on this before we vote? And Councilor, oh, okay. I thought we had extra hands up, but they went down. All right. Councilor Leary.
I thought there was going to be a little bit of wordsmithing, just to be clear that this isn't something that's it's only being asked during the budget season. I actually think it might be clarifying and easier to read, and especially if we're thinking of members of the public looking at it, I don't see any harm in it at all.
How about if we just add a sentence that says, this shall take place once a year in the budget book?
Perfect. I'm voting yes then.
Okay, everybody good?
Yes,
Are the
I'm
proponents
okay with that.
that?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Hopefully, I think our administration is also listening and probably has received the message. Is that a motion as amended, Councillor Kalis? Okay. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm opposed.
I heard who's opposed?
Brenda. Councilor Noel.
Okay, so we're 21 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions. Okay, do we have any other comments or questions on the Human Resources Department budget overall? And if not, can I have a motion to hold that budget?
So moved.
Okay, motion to hold by Councillor O'Leary. Any other discussion on hold? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's held for the night. We'll submit this resolution and get a reply tomorrow. We're going to go on to our comptroller's budget. Councillor Kalis, if you could introduce this budget, please.
Sure. We were joined by our comptroller, Steve Curley, and he detailed what the comptroller's office does. First, stating that he has 6 full-time employees, 1 part-time. They manage the financial compliance for the city, including the audit in all state, local, and reporting, and making sure that's done on time. The budget is $65.4 million, but includes a lot due to controls. There's a lot of interfund transfers, workers' comp, retirement, other appropriations, property insurance is in there, $3.6 million in reserves for snow and ice and wage reserves. We had quite a long discussion regarding the retirement board vote, the appropriation to the retirement board, to Horace Mann, the growth rate of 9.6 for 6.6, the timing of the transfers into retirement, the actual dates as to when they move. Ms. Lamud then pointed out some more information about Medicare B changes in the budget, as well as the OPEB money from the school budget coming over. We had a discussion about the COLA increase, and then we voted to hold the comptroller's budget 6-0, and at a later date, approve the budget for $65,377,407 in a vote of 2 in favor, 2 against, and 4 abstentions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on the comptroller's budget overall before we take up resolutions? Apologies. I don't see any. So, Councillor Gentile, the first resolution we have here is requesting the establishment of an unrestricted reserve fund. Madam Clerk, can you please put this up on the screen? If I could ask you to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that most of the council is at one point, as Council Crossley pointed out, has had a chance to discuss this item, weigh in on it a little bit. What I did hear in finance at the last meeting that a couple of people expressed the desire to see what I was suggesting in more detail on paper. So I did try to do that. I tried to get a memo out to everybody by noontime today, which summarizes the new unrestricted reserve fund and the sources of the money for the fund and the reasoning for establishing it. And I hope you had a chance, to take a look at it. I think I certainly made the case where I don't see where they could find anything negative in having this fund, at least over the course of the next year, And as I suggest, at that time, you could review it and the mayor could recommend, and we could dispose of whether it's interest or interest in principal from the fund as we saw fit for the next fiscal year. But at this point, to spend $10 million to save $600,000 in bonding when we could raise a significant more amount of money and interest, as information that was supplied by our treasurer, not by me, as to what T-bills are currently running, I think it makes more sense than ever. The only other thing I forgot to add, and I just want to add it now, is I have both Chair Grossman and Ms. Lemieux mentioned to me, well, I asked them about the concerns that Moody's Investor Services raised at the annual meeting that the city had with them, because I was surprised to hear at a finance meeting that they were concerned about our reserves. And both the chair and Maureen pointed out that it wasn't so much the amount of money, because between the rainy day fund and our enterprise accounts and other accounts, we have very good reserves. Their concern was that the reserves in just about all cases were restricted. So I should have had one more bullet point that would just say, as a plus, it's not by any means the main reason for doing something like this, but if we were to have an unrestricted reserve for this amount of money or somewhere in the ballpark, certainly Moody's and others is going to look upon that quite favorably. And as I said, I should have added that as a bullet, but I just want to make that point now. So I guess I'll leave it at that, and I'll be curious as to objections that are raised. I don't understand and I haven't heard anything different, so I assume that the mayor's office is not inclined to go in this direction, but if if my colleagues think that it makes sense, I think it would be important to send a very strong message to the administration so that we can at least get a response back, because I'd be really curious as to what their objection is. Thanks.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Okay, I see Councillor Bowman. I just want to take hands for a moment.
One last thing, I'm sorry. These numbers could change as far as if like, for instance, it says the purpose of this fund would be to generate no less than $750,000. That could say $600,000, that could say $1 million. You could say no less than that, and you could use principal in order to make sure that we get at least X amount of dollars. So the point being that I think that there's room, and there's probably something that I didn't think about that would help to, strengthen the idea of this fund. So I'm not trying to say that I've got all of these parts to this motion 100% correct. There's certainly an opportunity for better ideas.
Thank you. So I saw two hands so far, Councillors Bowman and Humphrey. Do we have any other hands right now to add to the list? Okay, and then Councillor Greenberg. So Bowman, Humphrey, then Greenberg.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. All right, so setting aside the source of this reserve fund, setting aside the $10 million for Lincoln Elliott, we have the $7.8 million for the property tax overlay, the $1.5 from the additional free cash that was to be set aside for the rainy day stabilization, and $5 million from some unknown source. If this is money, I think what I heard from the comptroller was, if this is money already in in funds that we are holding for a variety of reasons. It's already being invested in this way, being invested in a way that's getting, a decent return on a short time frame, similar to what we would do in a reserve fund. So, I think the administration is already counting on that additional interest in a way. So it's like we're double counting. Does that make sense? Like they're already counting on being able to make returns on these funds that we're trying to turn around and say, let's put them aside in this unreserved funds, but direct them towards the school for this 600,000. So I feel like that's double counting. That would be one thing. And I appreciate the concern of thinking about putting $10 million in right now, given the relatively high returns. And I think what we heard is a different investment strategy as to whether or not we want to prepay this now or a year from now. But I certainly don't feel like we can count on the returns from the 7.8 and the 1.5 and the 5 million that we haven't yet identified where it's coming from, because that's already part of a bigger plan of just managing the city. So, for that reason, I just don't feel comfortable voting against this, and certainly I wouldn't want to do anything that would impact being able to move forward on Lincoln Elliott. Thank you.
Thank you. Just two quick clarifications, and Councilor Gentile, correct me if I'm wrong. The $5 million identified in number 4 is not an unknown source. It's a line item on the free cash document that Ms. Lemieux provided us that identified that we have that $5 million in free cash, but it's unallocated.
It's unallocated
for this
anything
fiscal
else.
Year.
Okay, thank you.
And just the only other thing I would say, and I'll let the comptroller speak to this, I think your point about, money that's unallocated being, invested in the meantime while it's held is the point that he was interested in making, but I'll let him speak to it. I think the one distinction I would make is that it's not necessary, we don't know what the administration's intention is with it or what they're counting or what they're not counting. Ms. Lemieux made it clear at Finance that the money in the property tax overlay account, the mayor intends to leave there with no further comment about why. We know that the $1.5 million they would like to move to the rainy day stabilization fund to move that ratio higher than 5%. And the $5 million free cash is identified for emergencies. So we just I don't think we know with clarity whether this is, double counting or what kind of counting is my point. And they don't have to tell us that. I just am trying to parse out and make sure we understand. But let me call on the comptroller quickly to expand upon the investment comment.
Thank you, Chair. So the city works in a pool cash basis where unless the cash is restricted to a fund that requires the interest earned to go into that fund, all interest earned on money in the bank goes to general fund. So this year, I forget what the number was at the budget meetings, but I think it was close to 5 million. That was before the treasurer had booked the April interest. So that was through 9 months. In this case, all of these sources of money are part of that pooled cash sum. So this would essentially be taking out $25 million from this pool of money that generates general fund interest income. So theoretically, the numbers aren't right, but if you had $100 million sitting in the bank and all of that interest earned was going to general fund income, now you take $25 million and you set it aside where that interest earned is going to this newly established fund. Now you only have $75 million that's earning interest for the general fund revenue. And so in essence, that would make your general fund budgeted revenue to go down proportionally because you wouldn't be expecting that revenue to come in. Is that?
Yeah, that's great explanation. I have a couple clarifying questions for you. So let's take, for example, the 7.8 million on the property tax overlay account. The interest that we're earning on that money goes to general fund revenue?
Yes.
And, well, the 1.5 and the 5 right now are in free cash, so that obviously
Those are
is going to
general
general
fund as
fund revenue. Okay, do we have comments or questions on this point? Okay, we have 2, so Councillor Bowman, then Gentile, and I haven't forgotten about others who have their hands raised. I just want to try to keep points consistent. Councillor Bowman, then Gentile.
So my question is, if I look at the sources and uses of funds page, I'm going to find the interest that we were just discussing as a source. Like if we pull this out, you're saying that we will not have, that the expected revenue that we're expecting to be able to use for the general fund will be less. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make that clear.
No,
Thank you.
Councillor
That was
Gentile
my-
may want to make this point, but I will just point out. So through March this year, we've earned $5 million in interest income. We had budgeted $600,000. I believe the budget in here for interest income next year is $2.5 million.
Right.
I mean, look, none of us have a crystal ball. Right. Most likely, we're looking at a number well north of $2.5 million that's going to come in from interest income. But Councillor Gentile, let me go to you next.
So the point that Council Bowman makes and Mr. Curley make about the money already earning interest is correct. However, the pool cash rate of return is certainly lower than the example that Mr. Mendez gave me about T-bills. And you can't be any safer than one-year T-bills. There's a pretty decent difference in what the pool cash is earning and what we could be earning if they were invested that way. The rainy day fund, I misstated saying $1.5 million. It's not a big difference. It's $1.75 million because there's another $250,000 as far as the source goes. You also have to figure $10 million. We're not really talking about $25 million being in the pool cash fund because we're going to be using $10 million of that. So that's going away. So please don't lose sight of the fact that you're not going to have $10 million invested. In the scenario that I'm suggesting, you would have a specific fund with $25 million. If you put the $10 million as cash into the Lincoln Elliott project, that's $10 million that isn't earning any money for you. And the chair's already made my point. We budgeted for $600,000 in interest income, and we're already over $5 million with a quarter to go. And so we're going to end up in the $7 million range. And I asked Ms. Lemieux, I thought it was $2 million is what's in the budget for next year. You may be correct that it's 2.5, but I think it's safe to say it's significantly understated. The other part of all of this is, we need to shake some of this money out, especially the overlay surplus. I'm going to try and choose my words carefully, but it makes absolutely no sense to have almost $32 million sitting in that overlay surplus account. The assessor was in the other night, and by his own admission, told us everything that needed to be covered, and we still had a little less than $8 million. Get it out of there like any other administration would have done already by this time and put it into the fund. That's another thing that we accomplish by doing this. But again, it's a proposal that says that this, with the interest rate environment that we're currently in, that this makes sense at least for the course of the next year. And as I said in my memo, we're supposed to be bonding $25 million for Lincoln Elliott in January of '25. Well, knowing what whatever the interest rate environment is at that time will help us to decide maybe we should use some cash in bond less. But we don't need to make that decision right now. And the last point, at least for now, that I'll make is, if interest rates are down in a year and you're not comfortable with the return that we would be looking at, keep in mind that that means borrowing is going to be less expensive. So that's not a bad thing. So I appreciate it. I've taken plenty of your time. I'll be curious to hear what others say.
Thank you. I have Councillor Humphrey, then Greenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just keep it brief. I think that investment income is incidental for us. It is not our goal. The taxpayers gave us revenue to expend it and make some savings if possible, which is what the deal is on the table with regard to the Lincoln Elliott appropriation. And we aren't in the asset management business, so it's time to move on.
Councillor Greenberg, then Downs.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Councillor Gentile's expertise and creativity with this funding structure, but I am naturally an adverse to risk person. My concern with the $10 million being put into this reserve would jeopardize the Horace Mann project. That's my primary concern. We all told the mayor that that's what we wanted, that this was a priority once the override failed. This was a way to get the Horace Mann project back on track. So I am not comfortable using that $10 million to be put in this fund. Perhaps we could use the overlay account to make such a fund as a pilot to see how that works, but I am not comfortable with the $10 million. Thank you.
Councillor Downs. Councillor Downs? You're not muted, but we can't hear it.
Okay. This is the bad headphones kicking in. I'm sorry. Is this better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry about that. Occasionally these things just go. So I appreciate Councillor Gentile and others' creative efforts to increase the school budget, but I think that was really what the mayor was doing, and also really what the override was about, and it failed. And so we're now facing this situation. But I have a question for the proponent nonetheless on the T-bill proposal. It really, is there anything that prevents the administration from investing in one-year T-bonds to realize better interest on our any of our reserves that they intend not to spend for a year? Is there anything preventing them from doing that now?
I think that was directed to you, Councillor Gentile.
I don't know, is the treasurer here tonight? Because
Not to my knowledge, but let's check. Ms. Lemieux is here. And of course, our comptroller's here.
I don't believe that there is a restriction, but to be honest with you, it is a question that he has better prepared to answer. And there may be some other questions. I will say this, and to the previous speaker's comment, our $25 million in the rainy day stabilization fund is invested in T-bills. The treasurer made that switch back in the fall. And none of us really knew about it, but we had a discussion about it. And quite frankly, it was the right thing to do. And our return is evidencing that. So I don't see why you couldn't take this pool money and do the same thing, as long as you knew for sure you weren't going to have a need to use it. But you can't. T-bills and he can correct me if I'm wrong, are safer than where the money is sitting right now, which is the MMDT account, which is a state-funded program, or it's run by the state. But T-bills are, my understanding is, are even safer than the MMDT, which is where all this pool money is right now. But that would be an interesting discussion, you know, to have with the treasurer.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Comptroller, I just didn't know if you wanted to say a word about that question.
Sure. So most of that would be Ron Mendez's role to answer, but we currently do have some of the general fund or pooled cash in T-bills. I don't know the number, but I want to say he has an invested trust of general fund money of approximately $50 million. I don't know what portion of that are in T-bills. And it may be something where if this 25 million gets moved out of the general pool of cash, which then would have its own set of restrictions, and it would earn more with T-bills, but you'd have restrictions on getting the money out, whether it's through vote or actually for the T-bills to mature. And that may make the treasurer, and I don't want to speak for him, but if he's comfortable putting X amount currently in T-bills, 25 million got moved away from the pool cash, and not be as comfortable having that same amount in the T-bills that he currently has. So that may change his investment strategy. Again, that would be something for Mr. Mendez.
Councillor Downs, does that give you enough information for now, or?
Yes, that does. Although if Mr. Curley speaks again, you just got to try to figure out how to speak a little louder because I could barely hear him.
Sorry.
That's better. Thank
Did
you.
Did you get the gist, or would you like him to repeat it?
No, I got the gist. Thank you. I'm set.
Okay. Councillor Maliki.
Oh, thank you. So I am in support of this resolution. I think the advantages are preserving the flexibility, not tying up the $10 million, which could easily be bonded for a 30-year project. It seems to me having an unrestricted reserve fund is an advantage in two ways. It would, as pointed out, I guess by Ms. Lemieux, make the rating agencies happy that we have an unrestricted reserve as opposed to the enterprise funds, which are dedicated, and the rainy day fund, which as far as I can see, we're not going to spend short of a nuclear catastrophe or something like that. And also, it would be usable at any time, as I understand it, as opposed to free cash, which is sort of frozen in the interval between the close of the fiscal year and the certification. One other point and question, I'm really puzzled by the statement that doing this would, or more particularly, I guess, not funding the, doing this and not putting the 10 million into the bonding reduction for Lincoln Elliott would somehow jeopardize Horace Mann. Because I'm looking at the administration's own chart that dated May 12. Mayor Fuller's recommended strategy to support the Newton Public Schools, May 2023, which is that whole morass of linkages laid out. And the top line is increase pensions via COLA to retirees and ensure sustainability of pension funding. Arrow. Pension funding schedule lengthened by 1 year, annual increase in funding reduced from 9.6 to 6.6, COLAs increased 3 years in a row. Arrow, funding immediately available to service debt on 30-year bonds for $23 million Horace Mann addition and renovation. So that has effectively been accomplished. So I don't see any connection between this proposal and jeopardizing Horace Mann. Somebody please explain how there is a connection, if there is.
Thanks, Councilor Malachy. And Councilor Greenberg, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That statement was based on an answer that Ms. Lemieux gave at one of our discussions. I believe it was at Finance. I think Councilor Greenberg and others had asked what ramifications would there be if we did not approve their request for $10 million of cash towards Lincoln Elliott. And one of Ms. Lemieux's answers was that it would potentially jeopardize the Horace Mann project as they would bump it down the list. But Councilor Greenberg, I'll let you answer that further.
From what I understood, the money we are saving from the COLA and the pension is being used for the schools. The $10 million going to Lincoln Elliott, the money that we'll be saving on interest, if that is not there, then the money we're saving from the pension and the COLAs would have to be used for the schools, $600,000, and then that would delay the Horace Mann project. That's what I understand.
So just one clarification, because you said the mayor's initial proposal for the reduction in the pension appropriation and the COLA base increases, the money that was freed up, they
Right.
tied to Horace Mann. They tied the $10 million to Lincoln Elliott, but Ms. Lemieux's statement was then to the second point of your answer, Councilor Greenberg, that if we did not proceed in approving this $10 million for Lincoln Elliott, that then potentially that money would fill that school budget need and thus take, potentially reduce the Horace Mann money. So
That's how I understood it. Yeah.
now, and that is not me opining that is what would actually happen. That is a description of what we were told at the meeting. Now, Ms. Lemieux is here, so if folks want to hear from her, I'm happy to invite her to speak and speak to it herself. Councilor Markowitz, your hand is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually think Ms. Lemieux probably should answer that question. I had a conversation with her earlier today. We need to be very, very careful here where, you know what a T account is? You got debits on the right, credits on the left. We got money moving from one place to another. I'm not sure everyone's following the detail of what's going on here. I will just say superficially, I don't believe the $10 million, for example, forces anything with respect to Horace Mann. There is a choice there. If that $10 million winds up going back to the administration and saying, we're not going to buy down the bond offering, we're going to make that 10 million available. That's an incredible amount of money, excuse me, to have available. And you can do a lot of things with it. I would not recommend you do capital items with it. So to the extent of Horace Mann work is capital, that should be bonded. The only component of that should be current and through current cash is the debt service, extending the benefit range over the time that you realize that. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the 10 million, but I really caution us to be careful to think that any decision we're making with respect to this automatically stops Horace Mann. It doesn't. There are choices to be made. Those choices could, of course, put certain things at a higher priority than others. They could change the allocation of monies, but I think it's not correct to say that that's true. That's certainly not been decided as a sort of a guiding principle for us going forward in deciding what we want to say about these funds. So if you would, through the chair, I would ask Ms. Lemieux to kind of answer and may potentially ally Councilor Greenberg's concerns that you don't support the 10 million, Horace Mann's out the window. I just don't think it's true.
Madam Clerk, could we promote Ms. Lemieux and ask her to participate in this? Okay, Ms. Lemieux, I'm told you're on. Welcome. Assuming that you heard the last few comments and back and forth, if we could ask you to clarify and/or comment on this topic, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would support what Councilor Greenberg said. Nothing, and I also support what Councilor Markowitz said. Nothing has been completely decided yet. However, this is our entire plan moving forward, appropriating more money to the school department for operating needs as well as Horace Mann. These are all puzzle pieces that are really interconnected. And so what I had said in that email when I first responded to Councilor Greenberg, what I said at Finance, I think I've been consistent in saying this. If you do not appropriate the $10 million to pay down $10 million worth of debt service on Lincoln Elliott, it will not allow us to have the $600,000 that we have already added to NPS. And so we would need to take a look at that, and the mayor will need to really decide what her top priority is. Is it the operating budget and the positions that have already been added back to NPS, namely the 12 positions that had to do with the large class sizes at the elementary level? Is that her top priority, or is moving forward with Horace Mann as quickly as we would like? Is that the one that has the priority? I would say to you, I believe that the mayor and many of you feel that the operating budget for Newton Public Schools right now is the higher priority. Maintaining class sizes is the higher priority for many people. Doesn't mean that Horace Mann would stop, but what it does mean is that $1,160,000 that we have in the comptroller's budget that we were intending to put to the design work on Horace Mann, that would quite possibly, we would only spend $600,000 less than that in the course of the next year so that we could fund the $600,000 in the school. So these are absolutely decision points that need to be made. But if this $10 million does not go forward the way that we have presented it, we absolutely have to make some decisions. What it has done is we have planned on borrowing $10 million next January. The timing is very critical in all of this. Next January, we anticipate that we will end up having to borrow at the highest interest rates that we have seen in probably 15 years and maybe even more than that. We used to be able to go out and do an advanced refunding, which meant that we could go out and, as we all can do with our mortgages at home, we can go as often as we want and refinance our mortgage. The city had only been able to do that once in the lifetime of the bond. And so we always had to be sure that we knew whether or not we were getting the best deal when we did it. In 2017, the tax laws were changed. We can no longer do an advance refunding. So we're not allowed to go out and get a lower interest rate. So the reason we've put this before you is this would allow us not to bond $20 million in January. It allows us to only bond $10 million to save that higher interest cost over the course of the next 30 years and take that savings that I already have in my forecast as going for debt service and instead put it toward operating funds for the Newton Public Schools. So I don't know if I was more confusing or less confusing, but that's what the strategy is, if you will.
I thought that was pretty clear. We've got Councilor Markowitz, Gentile, then Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to respond back to that. So a couple things about this 600, and we kind of went into the weeds on the 10 million. I apologize for dragging us into that because I know we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. But remember, if we don't use that $10 million to buy the bond down, we have $10 million. You got $600,000 for this. You got $1 million for that. Current money available to you, and you've got another $8 million left over. That seems to keep getting set aside here. That's the whole point of this. It's current money. It's not long-term capital money. It's money that should be used now for things like the $600,000 or the design project, if in fact that's not a capital item unto itself. So I just want to ask you in your thinking to consider that, because what you're saying is, I'm going to take all this money and I'm going to do it. I'm going to pay this bond down only because, really, I think I can get a better interest rate on the portion of this money I'm not bonding today later. And the amount of interest you're going to save there, okay, so it's a percentage point, 2 percentage points. Who knows if interest rates are going to go down? Even if they do, the amount of money you're saving relative to $10 million over a period of many years where the inflation is going to deteriorate that, it just doesn't seem to be worth it to me. But again, that's a rat hole. A little bit will go down, I think, when we do the 10 million. But I just want to be clear, people understand, we still have $10 million. All right? If we don't use it on the bond, we've got $10 million to spend on anything you want. Senior service programs, it's free cash. You can allocate it that way. Okay?
So I would say the rabbit hole is perfectly appropriate tonight, because I just want to go over how I expect procedure to shake out here.
Thank you.
So we're going to hopefully drive this conversation to a vote on this particular resolution. I expect that we will have a reply, if it's successful, that we will have a reply to the resolution by sometime over the course of the day tomorrow. You'll all note that we have noticed a special meeting of the City Council to begin prior to our Committee of the Whole tomorrow. And the purpose of that is so that, armed with the reply to this resolution, we can act one way or the other on the appropriation. And the reason that timing is important is that the school department in particular was concerned about what the impacts of our actions may have on their allocation, and whether they may have to make especially personnel changes, because they are required to notify anybody whose position may be taken away or cut or whatever in the next year. So for the sake of clarity and planning and making sure the school department knows what money they can count on, our goal is to be able to be in a position to act on the free cash request tomorrow, first thing, and then we'll proceed with the remainder of our Committee of the Whole after that fact. Now, granted, of course, the resolution response sort of comes in the vein of this conversation. We're crossing from one format to a little bit and doing it this way, but in reviewing it with our clerk and the president, the proponent of this resolution, and our legal department, we all thought this was the cleanest way to proceed and come to a resolution on this question. So to say, I think these kinds of points are in order tonight and also in order tomorrow. But by the time we get the answer tomorrow, we're going to be pretty close to action. So I have a whole bunch of hands. First, Ms. Lemieux, I saw your hand, so let you respond if you want. And then Councillor Gentile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can actually wait.
Okay. Councillor Gentile, then Larry.
Madam Chair, what you just described actually wouldn't even be necessary tomorrow night if the administration were to accept a unanimous resolution that we made earlier to increase the amount of free cash to support the budget to $2.1 million. Then there's no rush. Secondly, Councilor Greenberg, there is absolutely no way that what happens with this resolution tonight is going to negatively impact Horace Mann. We're not going backwards on Horace Mann. That's not going to happen. I can't say it any stronger than that, but Councilor Markowitz was right. Well, let me just give you one math part of this. Hope if I could only get Councilor Humphrey to join me in this part of it. Take the $10 million, not the $25 million. Take the $10 million, put it in, give it to the treasurer, and tell him to put it in a fund right now with one-year T-bills if that's how he sees fit. Okay? Ms. Lemieux, you told us earlier in this budget season that you were using a figure of 4% on the rate to bond $10 million. Annually, that's $600,000, you said. I think it's a little closer to 572,000, but what's 28,000? If you put $10 million in the bank tomorrow and put it into T-bills, that's going to generate, based on the rate that we got from the treasurer, $512,000. 60 grand less. It's going to cover the debt service. So why throw the cash away when you can generate the income? It's basically a guarantee. $572,000 to support a $10 million in bonds when you can generate at 5.12% $10 million. I'm not even talking about $25 million. I think that's what that fund should be. But if you only take the $10 million and put it into T-bills, you're going to almost cover your debt service. Also, keep in mind, they're not talking about going out and bonding this until January. When do we start having to pay the money, with all due respect, Ms. Lemieux?
Next year, so fiscal 25.
All right. So we're not even going to have to start paying on that $10 million. Meanwhile, you're generating this income. You can start, as I say, you can get 13 months, never mind 12. You can put this money into a fund. It doesn't take any time at all. You can do it in a matter of days. So why wouldn't you raise that kind of money with the $10 million instead of just sinking the cash in when you could just bond it and cover it? That's all I have for now.
Ms. Lemieux, do you want to answer that before I move on?
Thank you. Yes, for a conversation about today and the next year or so, Councilor Gentile, I am absolutely happy to agree we could earn more money in the next year, maybe even two, than we would need or than we might otherwise spend. However, this is a 30-year plan. And so where we had 30 years worth, and it is 572, that the number really is, and we rounded up to 600. This gave us, in our minds, as we were crafting all of this to try to figure out how we accomplish all of the things that you wanted us to, it gave us a stream of income, if you will, or a stream of a reduced expenditure in one area so that we could increase the expenditures in the schools. I don't doubt for a minute that we couldn't earn 5% or more for the next year. I don't doubt that for a minute, and I would never disagree with you on that. The problem is 2 or 3 years from now, when we're not earning interest at a decent rate and we decide we have to do whatever we would choose to do, we would have already sold bonds this coming January at a higher rate. And so what we would end up, if we take the money and invest it now, we're going to get a short-term gain, but it will be at a long-term loss. That's my belief, and that's why we are opposed to it.
Councillor Leary, then Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say that I've been listening carefully onto both sides on this, and I do appreciate Councillor Gentile's expertise in finance and his, deliberations about what we could do that might be better for the city. And I think it's always important to question where we're putting our money. I just think that, Ms. Lemieux, the comptroller, the treasurer, the mayor's office, they've worked really hard to put together a plan, and it's a very delicate balancing act, I think. And I'm just wary about upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, this late in the game. You know, yes, we have high interest rates, but we also have high bond costs. And I also not sure about what kind of financial vehicles other than T-bonds that we would be using to get these higher interest rates. At the same time, we need the flexibility as well. And I am obviously very committed to Lincoln Elliott School, and I'm wary about not setting aside that money now. So I would have to say that I'm probably going to vote no or abstain on this item. I just feel that there's too many variables, and I don't, be honest with you, I can't tell you exactly what is the best thing based on what I've been hearing, what I've been reading over the last few weeks. And I'm going to go with the mayor's office and her team on this one. So thank you.
Councillor Oliver, then Downs.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I do have a question through the chair. I just want to, most of the points that I had originally, had caused me to raise my hand originally, I think have been addressed. I am a supporter of this concept that Councilor Gentile has put forth, at least certainly to the point where I am comfortable asking the mayor's office and putting this idea forward, because I do want to continue to have this conversation. I think it's worthwhile having. This isn't jeopardizing anything. We still have to vote on the item tomorrow night for kind of securing or allocating the $10 million. But I just heard something from Ms. Lemieux that I just wanted to understand. Did I just hear you saying that the administration, yourself, are against this idea already? Did I just hear that?
Ms. Lemieux, you need to unmute. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you have heard that we have real concerns about where this drives us, because whatever we all choose to do over the next, week or two, as you're all deliberating through this, I need to either borrow or have $20 million in January. So whether it's 10 from this and 10 that we borrow, or that we borrow 20, my concern is that we will be borrowing at a rate that is higher in January than we have had to borrow before, and then we will be able to earn on this money for the next 30 years. So you've heard our grave concern about this. We did not give you, if you notice, any responses to the resolutions tonight, even though they've been out in the public realm, because we really believe it's important for the process that we listen to your deliberation. But I can tell you we have concerns about this.
Okay, I think a minute ago I heard a slightly different phrase, but I understand your point. Thank you. I appreciate that. All set.
Ms. Lemieux, I have a clarifying question for you. If you went out to sell our bonds next winter, and it was clear that the rates that were coming back were too high, couldn't you opt at that time to not go ahead with bonding that $10 million at that point?
Only if we had some other source for it. As you know, the construction is, or the beginnings of the construction are well underway. If we're going to finish Lincoln Elliott and have it open for September of 25, which I believe is the schedule that it's on, we need to bond $20 million next year.
But you're going to bond $10 million no matter what, right?
We're going to spend $20 million, or have committed $20 million by June 30th of 2024. And so that's how we always figure out how much money. I work very closely with Josh Morse. We do this all the time for every project. We try to figure out exactly what the cash flow will be so that we don't bond too much money too soon, particularly in this case. I wouldn't want to bond more than we would have to in January if we think that rates are going down, a year from now.
But I guess I just want to
But
make
I need to have 20 million. I
by
need
June
20
of
million.
2024.
Yes.
And in January or February of 2024, you're going to bond 10 million regardless. So then there,
Yes.
in theory, there's still between January, February 2024 and June 2024 to determine where to come up with the next 10 million.
The fund is unrestricted. That could be the source. The fund is unrestricted.
But that's right? I mean, in theory, we could wait and see what interest rates are in January or February and have wiggle room to figure out where to take the other 10 million from. I'm not saying that's what you want to do. I'm just asking if it's possible.
Well, it could technically be possible.
Okay.
It would not be what we would want to do. We certainly need, feel a need to know what the and I don't mean resolution by meaning the resolution in front of you, but how you resolve this whole situation. We certainly want to know ahead of time because we've committed to giving the schools $600,000 a year ad infinitum. So, we certainly need to understand whether or not that funding source will stay in place.
Councillor Downs, then Humphrey, then I just saw another hand, then Danberg.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for Ms. Lemieux through you, and that was wanted to be really clear about bonding. My understanding as a homeowner, but also as someone who watches other government entities for my day job, is that a lot of us may borrow high, but then pay down our high interest debt and sometimes use lower interest debt or cash on hand to do so. What I thought I heard from Ms. Lemieux was that Newton cannot pursue that strategy. We cannot pay off our high interest bonds early. Is that correct?
That is correct, Counselor, at least for the first 10 years. And then I'm not sure what the new laws mean. So in the tax laws changed in 2017. Up to that point in time, almost every year we were doing an advance refunding. We saved the city probably, I think it was between $15 and $18 million in the first several years that I was here doing that, restructuring all of our bonds. We can't do advanced refundings anymore. And so that's what happened with government agencies, I believe, in the 2017 tax reform.
Now,
Certainly, that's what happened to me.
I recall you're doing that, and I recall being impressed. The MWRA is still defeasing. They are paying down high interest debt, long-term debt. I'm not sure how old it is because they have debt from 1985, $7 billion worth of debt from 1985 that needs to be paid off at a certain schedule, and sometimes they're prepaying it when they have the extra cash so that the interest rate is lower overall. They're paying off the high interest and taking out a lower interest debt. But if Newton cannot do that, that puts us in a 10-year bind. And I'm not willing to pretend I know better than you guys do. So I'm not going to be voting for this resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to note that we've been joined by Councillor Laredo online. Councillor Humphrey, then Danberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Leary noted, we have a carefully structured deal on the table for 2 months now, and that's better than back of the envelope constantly changing plans thrown together in the past week or so, or even just today alone. Moreover, by Councillor Gentile's own numbers a few minutes ago, his plan gets a worse return, even in just 1 year, than the administration deal structure on the table, saying it's close, doesn't matter, it's less. Also, more broadly, the resolution tonight with all its sections is wiping out all, not just some, reserves that we have on hand. And we do have some things we need to save cash for, in addition to unexpected emergency expenses. We cannot vote to plant magic beans in hopes of growing a magic money tree. Thank you.
Councillor Danberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we have heard that we can't do advanced refunding, and we would be, if rates go up, let's say in January, which they could very well do. I understand that the market took a dive today, and when stocks go down, bonds go up, value of the interest rates, it is an inverse relationship usually. We would be locked into an interest rate for 10 years. And since these are public funds, we have a responsibility to do the prudent thing. And so while this is an interesting thought, I am not going to vote for it. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any. Oh, Councillor Kalis.
I want Councillor Gentile to know what I'm. Oh, are you on the phone? Oh, there you go. No. What I'm thinking, because look, I hear you. I agree with you in how you've laid everything out, but I'm not going to support it because you're not the mayor at this point. And what I mean by that is, if you were mayor and came to us with the proposal that you just talked about, I'd be behind you 100%, because I know how your mind works and that you have that experience, and you'd execute on it in the way that you want to do it. To ask the current mayor to completely shift her thinking and approach, I think it could work out, but I also think it can be dangerous. And I think it's a lot of money, and so I'm going to support what she has outlined at this point.
Councillor Leboeuf.
Yes, I'm going to wrap up what Councillors Kalis and Humphrey and Larry have said, and maybe add a little something to it. There's many ways to approach something financially. What has been presented to us is linked together. I don't think that's a negative. It's a creative way to do things. We have a very strong form of mayoral government here, and the checkbook is held by the executive branch, who work 12, 15, 17 hours a day on this budget, and it's their baby. A lot of us have been talking about the lack of control that we have, and it's just the way our government is set up. We have this one little piece here where we have to vote on this 10 million. And I agree with my colleagues that there's many ways to do things, and this is what the administration wants to do. I also think it's a better way to go, because we need flexibility and we need to have funds available. I know Councilor Gentile says, well, just take the 10, forget about the rest. The resolution talks about bundling together a lot more money. I want to support the administration on this. I think that we really shouldn't throw a wrench in a plan that works. There may be 4 different ways to slice it up, but this is what Ms. Lemieux, who I have faith in, and the administration has come up with to reduce the number of teachers that we lose, to get a lot of different things done, and I will not be supporting this resolution.
Councillor Markowitz.
I want to thank Councilor Lipoff for those comments, because I happen to agree with like 95% of what you said. But I'll say this, you know, this is in front of us. This is a docket item. So I view it as an opportunity for us to voice our questions, our potential alternative ideas, which is what we're doing right now. I see no harm in asking the administration to respond to this. If nothing else, it adds additional transparency to the decision-making process. There are many ways to play this. There is not a right or a wrong here. It's very clear. You can, in your own personal finances, you can decide to carry debt. You can decide that you're the type of person who doesn't want to carry debt. I know we all come from homes that probably experienced that philosophy, you know, from the time we were little kids. This is about how you want to play it. I don't think there's a lot of risk in creating more cash available for us now to spend. I think it gives us flexibility. It does create more work. And I'll say, as I said to Ms. Lemieux earlier today, I think it was today, I have the utmost respect for the administration's financial approach here. I think you provide very good explanations behind the mechanics of a lot of what we do. I've always been able to follow it. I've always found it very informative. But I think there are other ways to play this, and I really think we should think about that. And I think part of it is eliciting a response here and say, what if we created this fund? It's not that we're going to do it necessarily, but let's get a response on it, and we'll continue the conversation on the subcomponents of this tomorrow when we take up that docket item. So I will support it. Thank you.
Councillor Gentile.
Just one request. If you're on the fence between voting no or abstaining, I would ask you to abstain so that we can get this to the administration and get a response back. That would be my last request.
Okay, do we have I don't see any other comments right now. Do we have a motion on this item? Motion to approve by Councillor Markowitz. Okay, just before we vote, I want to comment myself. So I'm going to support this for a number of reasons. The first thing I want to say is that I believe deeply that our mayor is incredibly smart and well-meaning and kind-hearted and makes decisions that she genuinely believes are in the very best interest of our beloved city. And I don't question or doubt that for a second, and I cannot imagine a harder working individual than she is. And I think she deserves credit and respect for all of those things. And Ms. Lemieux, I think I've tried to say a lot and hopefully have said often, I feel very similarly about you and love having the opportunity to work with you for all of those reasons, because I think you are also incredibly smart and kind-hearted and dedicated and doing things that you believe are in the long-term best interest of our beloved city too. So anything that I have said or will say, I hope you know, even if any of us don't choose our words carefully, speaking for myself, that I feel that way. That said, I think this is a good idea. Councillor Gentile and I each had these similar thoughts, not exactly with the same format, at different times, independently, and sort of discovered that over the course of the weeks leading up to this. And I think good ideas deserve to be vetted and heard and considered, and I don't see a tremendous amount of downside to it. So personally, I'm going to support this. I respect all the comments. I thought it was a really thoughtful discussion. I hope we can vote now, and then we'll see where things come out. Let's do a roll call on this one.
Councillor Baker.
Aye.
Councillor Bowman.
No.
Councillor Crossley.
No.
Councillor Danberg.
No.
Councillor Downs.
Abstain.
Councillor Gentile.
Aye.
Councillor Greenberg.
No.
Councillor Grossman.
Aye.
Councillor Humphrey.
No.
Councillor Kalis.
Abstain.
Councillor Kelly.
Abstain.
Councillor Krinsman.
Aye.
Councillor Laredo.
Aye.
Councillor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff,
No.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Counselor Noel,
No.
Counselor Norton,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Ryan, Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Albright is absent. Motion carries 11 yeas, 9 nays, 3 abstentions.
Okay, so that will be submitted to the administration tonight. I expect we'll receive our formal reply, as I said, tomorrow. The next moment to act on this will be with the docket item before us at our special council meeting tomorrow. We're going to go on to the next resolution, which is a resolution requesting to grandfather current retirees with Medicare Part B reimbursement. Councilor Gentile.
Thank you. I'll try to be really brief on this one. I have expressed on several occasions that it really, of all the things in the budget, that this troubles me the most, that we would be reducing retirees' benefits in any way. And when I say benefits, I have always considered the retirement check that our former employees earn based on their rate of pay for the 3 highest years. That's one part of it. But their health care is also a very important part of their retirement benefits. And to take away $925, as I said the other night, especially to somebody who's getting a pension of $25,000 or $30,000 trying to hold on to their home, is a huge amount of money to that individual. And in some cases, it's double that because both of the people in the family are getting that entitlement. What I've tried to encourage the administration to do was to grandfather in the current retirees, but going forward, not extending this benefit to new retirees. I just think that when you retire and you have a certain budget, that you have a right to expect that that isn't going to change. Now, I want to address, because I know that somebody's probably going to raise the fact that, on the other hand, we have increased their COLA. There is a chart that was prepared, not by me, but by our actuary, Kathy Riley, that shows in dollars and cents exactly what the COLA increases mean. And, you know, today is when our retirees have to deal with inflation and everything else. And the COLA increase in the first year, you just look to the far right-hand column, it's going to mean $30. That's significantly less, obviously, than $925 or $1,850. It then goes up, the difference is $90 the following year, and you can read as well as I can. It's going to take quite some time for folks to even break even on that part of it. And retirees, especially those that are making very small retirement, they need the money today. So I think that this is the right resolution, but I want to offer an alternative because I know that people are worried about the costs. And also, since the COLA increase has come into play, since I first came up with this suggestion, there's another chart in there, and it explains the actual, this is the great things about being a city councilor. Sometimes, you know, you continue to learn stuff. And this has forced me to become a little bit more knowledgeable about retirement benefits, in particular, Medicare Part B. So if you look at that top line, that is called the standard rate. And usually when people talk about how the cost of Medicare Part B, the figure that we have been getting is $164.90. I didn't realize until I started to looking into this that there are 5 additional tiers on top of that. If you are, I think the motion is the right one, but if you are concerned, as I am, mostly about those in the very lowest end of the spectrum, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 annually in income, then another alternative would be to do what I am suggesting for all retirees that are only in the guaranteed rate area or classification, which is the top line. I don't know the numbers, but it would be significantly less than the numbers that we have heard to this point. Because keep in mind, a lot of it, when they give you those income ranges, that's everything. That's all your interest income. It's everything, including tax exempt income. They even make you add that back in. It's lines 2A and line 11 is how you calculate your income. So the other thought that I had in the spirit of compromise was to help those people that need it the most, that we might want to consider amending my item to help the folks in the standard rate category and not anyone other than that. I hope that is clear.
Okay, Councillor Crossley, and then Councillor Danberg, is your hand up for this, or was it up from earlier? From earlier. Okay, Councillor Crossley, you're first.
So through the chair to Councillor Gentile, just a question. It may be obvious that what we can do today, what we can ask today, is just for this one budget year. And I mean, I see the chart. I see how long it takes for somebody to, as you say, break even or even get a reasonably substantial annual stipend. So is your resolution just, maybe it's a duh, focused on this budget only?
Actually, the original motion was to grandfather the existing retirees in for as long as they live. If we're going to just limit it to the folks in the standard rate category, I would hope that we would do the same. And if we're not going to do that, maybe we would be silent. But at least for a few years, I don't want to get into should it be 1 year, should it be 3, whatever. I hadn't even thought about that. My whole thing was just, grandfather in those folks in the lowest category. But what we're doing right now is, to me, is just extremely uncomfortable. So any help that we can get for those folks that are in the lower category, I think would be a step in the right direction.
All set for now? Okay, Councillor Leary, then Bowman, then Kalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for Councillor Gentile. The other variable that I heard mentioned was lower in Blue Cross Blue Shield payments that kind of offset, not all, but some of the increase in Medicare Part B. And I wanted to ask if you included that figure as well, because I'd really like to be sure about what exactly is the increase in out-of-pocket costs.
That would be, I think Maureen is better prepared than I am to answer that question because she has done an evaluation. It hasn't been clear to me if we're talking about, I do know this, retirees' health care is going to be less expensive with Blue Cross and Blue Shield than active participants, active, staff, employees. But I don't know if it means it's just less of an increase or if it truly is going down from the previous year, and I don't know how much. I know that active employees, I mean, are going up from anywhere from 12 to 24%. But I don't know how, I don't know the actual numbers, but I know that Maureen has worked on that. She could tell you.
Ms. Lemieux, could you speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to do it quickly. Everyone on Medicare will see about a $636 per year decrease in their contributions. So that would be a decrease in what they actually either pay us. So I guess what they pay into us. I don't know if we actually take their Medicare Part D out of their retirement checks or not. But so it's a $636 decrease for real. In addition to that, they currently also now pay a $10 doctor visit copay. And so what we have been saying is if the average retiree visits their doctor 7 times a year, that's another $70. And so overall, what we've been saying is we expect the average retiree to save $700 from what they are doing now. The Medicare payment, and so that's true for a husband and a wife, it's $700 each. The Medicare payments, Alderman Gentile is completely right. The Medicare payments go to the individual also. So per individual, they would be losing the $925, but they would be saving about $700 a year. Now, in full disclosure, when we first got our quotes from Blue Cross didn't have any out-of-pocket max for our retirees for prescription drugs. We have negotiated with them and have been able to negotiate a $1,500 annual out-of-pocket max for prescription drugs. Currently, with Tufts, we have a $500 out-of-pocket max. We don't think, we're going to watch this very carefully, we don't think that many people will hit the $1,500 because it is minuscule what Blue Cross added to our premium rates, but we don't know those answers. So I want to be really clear that we're not quite sure yet what that means. We'll watch it closely and be able to tell you, but I don't want to give you half of an answer, just because you didn't really ask the other part.
So can I ask her a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Maureen, what's not clear to me is Medicare Part B has nothing to do with this because that's set by the government and that's going to be whatever it is. So the savings would be whatever the supplement is, correct?
Yes. So so all of the savings are on the supplement.
Right. So you're saying that the supplement will be $700 less than it was?
$636, but then there'll be no co-payment for doctor visits. So that's where the other money comes in that we're saying is a saving if somebody has an average of 7 visits a year. So the contribution rate per retiree, so husband and wife, they'll save $636 each a year on the contributions to the plan. Now the city saves 4 times that, but that's what's going to balance the huge increase for the actives. So yes, the contribution that people make, it's a $636 a year savings. And then no co-payment for doctor visits.
Councilor Leary, I think this was initially your question, so let me just check in with you. Are you getting the information that you need?
What I thought I heard Ms. Lemieux say essentially was that they would end up paying, she said something about the difference between 700 and was it 925? Would that be the 225 that they would be the additional money that they would be out of pocket because of the difference now that they're not getting the reimbursement for Medicare Part B, but their insurance is lower and they're not having to pay doctor's visits, which would, you're saying, estimate $70 a year.
That's correct. And for this coming June, we always pay this out the last week in June. This coming June, everybody will get their $925. They've obviously been on, their plan for this past year. Next year, effective July 1st, they'll start to see their savings. Next year, the intent is to to provide 50% of the Medicare Part B check, if you will, at the end of June. So $462. So next year, technically, people end up a little bit ahead because, instead of being $225 behind, they're ahead by a couple of $100. The following year, June of 25, is the year when people would not get any payment in that June. And so if you're not on too many medications, the $225 is the number that it's going to cost you. If you're on a lot of prescription drugs, that's why I say we're really going to watch this closely. You could potentially have a $1,500 out-of-pocket max. Now, that is significantly less than Medicare. That's why Blue Cross didn't bid it for us in the beginning. And when we realized that they didn't, we worked hard to negotiate with them because we certainly didn't want to not have an out-of-pocket max.
So it's important to stay healthy.
It's always important to stay healthy, financially.
Okay, so I've got Counselor Bowman, then Noel, then Laredo.
Thank you very much. I am likely to support this resolution. I certainly would be open to at least supporting continuing the payments for the lowest at the lowest level, the seniors who are getting the least amount of money. And certainly I think I'm extremely concerned to hear about the significant increase in the out-of-pocket expenditures for prescription drugs, especially given that we don't seem to have history on that to suggest what that might be. And I think especially changing insurers, I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and there are a lot of drugs that they don't cover well. If they're comparable from my plan to the city's plan, and end up having to choose to spend more on certain drugs that are just the right drugs, and they're very expensive. So I would even be supportive of saying continuing this, maybe for 3 years going forward for this lowest group, and come back and look at it again and see what the history is of prescription drugs and others as a compromise on this. Thank you.
Counselor Noel, then Laredo.
Thank you. So I'm inclined to support the intention of this as well. But what comes to mind is I actually admire I have respect for the position that the administration's in. It sounds like Ms. Lemieux is basically saying, nothing's guaranteed, but we've made a calculation to try to make people whole. That being said, I've sat on this council, this is my 6th year, and I have a greater understanding more than ever that people get into public service with a covenant that they're going to accept a lower pay with the idea that the employer is going to take care of them in perpetuity. Now, I have a respect for that arrangement. I fundamentally am not sure it's sustainable. But I understand that it's untouchable. So I do think that the idea of exploring that and figuring out a way to make it more affordable is something we actually need to do. But I do think it's not okay to pull the football when people are in their retirement and say, we're now going to change the rules. So what I would be open to, and I think this is what Councilor Gentile is getting at, is to set the clock now going forward. Now, I know that doesn't work because you've just taken on a new insurance plan and we're looking for some cash savings in the immediate. So this is a long narrative of saying, I'm not sure what the solution is, but I do think that we have a commitment to our retirees, and the pension plan as it exists is often unsustainable.
Councilor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So number one, I too take very seriously what I would agree is a covenant with our retirees. We have employed them. We've made certain commitments to them. We're, I think, honor bound to carry out those commitments. If we decide to change the rules of the game, and there may be very good reasons for doing so, very good reasons. You change them when people have the option as to whether they do something or not. You don't change it on them after they've fulfilled their end of the bargain. But I want to ask Ms. Lemieux, because I'm a little confused here, and maybe you can help me out. The savings you've described are for the following fiscal year, correct?
Yes.
Do we know what the savings are going to be 3 years from now?
The savings will actually increase a bit. If you look back a couple of weeks ago, I put together a package that had all of our plans for free cash. I actually did an analysis, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, that went out 5 years. So if we assumed that these premiums will go up 5% a year, and assume that our prior plan would go up 5% a year, the savings actually grows a little bit. So it's a little bit more of a savings. That 225, the 925 doesn't change each year. And so that delta actually becomes smaller.
Ms. Lemieux, how long is this contract for with Blue Cross? How many years?
I think it is technically 3, but I would not expect to see us, as long as it is a good arrangement, I wouldn't think we would go back out to bid for something probably in the 5 or 8 year time frame.
We have a 3-year agreement where they're telling us they're going to give us certain rates, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we know what the rates are going to be next fiscal year and for the 2 years after that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Were they guaranteed a guaranteed cap on how much rates increase or not?
No, the government sets a large portion of this rate.
How do we, my problem is you're touting savings over, we're taking away a certain amount of money and that's gone. And we all know what that amount is. You're touting a series of savings over multiple years, and yet I'm not sure that you can make that commitment. How do we know what the savings are going to be in year 3 or year 4 or year 5?
We don't know.
Okay, so that answers my question. You're making the assumption that these savings are going to carry out many years, but we have zero way of knowing if that's correct or not, right?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. What I will agree with is we don't know exactly what it will be. What we do know is that if we stay with our current plan, those costs increase every year. The new plan that we're moving to with Blue Cross, those costs will increase every year also. They will increase by about the same amount of money each year. And so that means that your savings will still be there. And it will actually grow a little bit. I'm absolutely confident in saying that.
How do you
exactly
know that?
how much I can't say.
I'm sorry, but I mean, forgive me for being, I think, either uninitiated, naive, or both. How do you know what the savings are going to be in year 4 from plan to plan? Because the plans change all the time.
That's what I'm agreeing with you. I don't know exactly what it will be. I know there will still be a savings, and I know it will be proportionately the same.
why is that? That's what I'm struggling with, Ms. Lemieux. Why do you know in year 4 that this plan is not just going to change what it does and not be as favorable?
Because part of the cost is set by the federal government because it's a Medicare program. So they're very careful, obviously, with what they're raising it. But it's all going to be based on what the cost of claims are across the country. Our self-insured plan is strictly based on our cost of claims, actual cost of claims, and administrative costs. Those cost of claims, they're certainly not going down. They're all going up. The Blue Cross plan is based on the actual cost of claims. They're going up also. So we know they're all going up. They will go up proportionately about the same.
So if you're correct, Ms. Lemieux, then every municipality in the state would be going with this plan.
Many are on the GIC. Many are fully insured already. Some are still self-insured. This will be a fully insured plan. That's what we're moving to.
I appreciate the effort to educate me. I'm still perhaps a little bit uneducated, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Lemieux, you had your hand up prior to being asked those questions. I didn't know if you had additional comments you wanted to make, and then I think we're through our hands, so I'm hoping that we can get to a vote. Ms. Lemieux, did you want to say anything else?
I'm sorry, no, I'm fine, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councillor Malachy.
Can I just clarify something Ms. Lemieux just said? Did you say that this will be a fully insured plan in the sense that the city will no longer be self-insured on healthcare costs?
Ms. Lemieux.
For Medicare, we will still be self-insured for the actives and for the non-Medicare retirees. That will all still be self-insured, but our Medicare retirees will not be self-insured any longer.
Okay, and you've told us how the employees' share of the cost goes down, and to the extent they see doctors, they save every time they see a doctor by the amount of the copay. Are there is there a counterbalance to that in the range of physician choices, provider choices under Blue Cross versus Tufts? Are there sort of disadvantages that are offsetting the cost savings, aside from the lack of a or much higher drug cap out of pocket?
No. So when we went out to bid, there will be a few doctors who are not on the Blue Cross plan that were on either, on Tufts, because if someone was on Medicare, they had to be in the Tufts plan. There may be a very few doctors. We're not even sure that there are any yet because if people have listed a physician's assistant as their primary person, that physician's assistant might not be listed in Blue Cross, but the practice may be, and the doctor who oversees the physician assistant may be. We actually have some of those cases that we're chasing down right now. We think it will be minimal, and in fact, we think that moving to Blue Cross, because they're not a regional plan, they're much more of a national plan, that there will be far less disruption than if we had gone anywhere else.
Okay. And so you don't expect doctor choice to be much restricted. Are drug choices going to be any more limited under the, I guess it's called a formulary?
The formulary is changes every year and is not necessarily the same from plan to plan. So again, there will be some changes. Not many. That was part of the whole calculation that was done when each of the carriers that responded to our RFP, when that our consultants went through and did that complete analysis. And so it is minimal, but it will be there will be a change for some people.
Okay. And one comment, I don't know how much interest there is in the secondary proposal of Councilor Gentile about limiting it to the lower people in the lowest premium surcharge tier, but I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on the practicality of administering that? I know the premium, your premium surcharge category, for example, for 2023, if I'm getting this right, it's based on your 2021 income. So there's kind of a time lag, and you don't even know until I think it's too late to try to modify your income, what the cutoff's going to be for the different tiers.
So I will tell you, I actually learned a lot when I saw what Councilor Gentile sent out to all of us. Many of us, myself included, are certainly at a point where we probably could qualify for Medicare. And when I looked at it, I did not understand that there are different levels of what you pay for Medicare Part B, to be honest. So I don't know what, in listening to the dialogue, the one concern I have is I don't know how we could quantify in a short amount of time how many people we are talking about who are in that lowest tier. I will, if that's what you bring forward as we're crafting our response to you, we'll certainly try to figure out tomorrow if that is a number that we can identify. So I'm not quite sure how that would happen.
Because right now, you don't need to know a retiree's all other income.
Correct.
You just pay them their pension, pay them their...
Correct.
Cover their health. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And what we actually pay them, the $925, just so that everybody understands what this was. This isn't about, it's not even technically about insurance. It was an incentive that was started probably decades ago at this point to incentivize people to move to Medicare when that would not have been people's first choice. And it saved the city money. Presumably it saved the retirees money, and by giving the retirees this incentive to move, the city felt that they saved a lot of money. Now, to be honest, I don't know that they really did or didn't, because we spend $2.3 million on this incentive at this point in time. 2009, the then Board of Aldermen voted to accept the state statute that moved everybody. Once you're 65 and you're Medicare eligible and you're retired, so not still working, retired, you have to move to Medicare. And so that might have been the right time for the city to have made a move to grandfather people in, or whatever, could have or should have happened back then, because that's when things really changed. But since that point in time, we've been paying the incentive to everybody as they retire.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I've got 4 more hands. I just want to take stock of where we are. It is 9:44, and we are not through our resolutions. We've been at this for 2 hours and 44 minutes. So I'm going to suggest that unless there is burning information that people need after these 4 comments, that we attempt to move to a vote. And I also just want to make a personal plea that when we get our replies to these resolutions tomorrow, that we do not spend another 2 hours and 44 minutes repeating what we all said tonight, but that we let it stand and act. So that said, Councillor Crossley, then Gentile, then Downs, then Krinsman.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I am also inclined to support this in concept. I wonder if a friendly amendment can be made, if the language could go back up. I'm not going to pick over it, but just so that there could, instead of a forever kind of intention, if they're now, with all of this additional information that we understand a little bit better in terms of the savings from one place versus another place, if there could be some kind of a time limit imposed. And I think Councillor Bowman earlier suggested 3 years. I don't know what's right, but we only have this budget year to commit to in any case. That's my comment.
One suggestion, because I was thinking about how to handle this. It sounds to me like there's support on several different levels for different iterations. Some support overall for the resolution, some support for a shorter period of time. We might consider submitting them as two separate resolutions. Does that appeal to, so that we, rather than sitting here debating which version, that we can sort of take people's pulse at two different levels? Does that add value, Councillor Gentile?
I think it could. There's one important piece of clarification, though, that I think we need for tomorrow. Are you done? I think I was next, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask Ms. Lemieux, I'm looking at a chart that I got from HR, and it's Medicare eligible retiree plans, and it talks about the supplement, Blue Cross Blue Shield MedX2, which is the supplement. And the rate that it uses is $74.30. But then right under that, it talks about Tufts Medicare Preferred, which I believe is the current plan, and it lists it at $77.20. That's only $3 a month. So I'm not sure where we're getting the $636. I know the chart that you gave us, Maureen, shows $127 a month, but it looks to me like that is projected. It's not what people are paying right now. Can you clarify that 100%, or are we better off to get back to this tomorrow?
So if I may, the Tufts Medicare Preferred, and then we also offer a
Medicare HMO
Blue Cross HMO. Those two plans, I don't know if what you have in front of you shows the numbers of subscribers. They both have a small number of subscribers. The over 2,000 retirees, they're in it's the Tufts, it's the MCP plan is what almost everybody is in. That's the one that I'm talking about. We have over 2,000 people in the MCP, which should also be on that chart if, depending on what you have in front of you. I don't know if...
It's not. All it has is Blue Cross Blue Shield MedX2, Tufts Medicare Preferred, and Medicare HMO Blue. And they're all similar. So I guess what I'm asking is, do we know for sure what our retirees are paying this year for their supplement?
So this year they're paying, I think the total monthly cost is just over 600. And so that's where, so 20% of that is the 120 something.
All right, because this says $77.20. I think we just need to, can we just double check that?
There are, yes, there are small numbers of people on a less expensive plan. And actually those two plans have always been fully insured. I can get you those exact numbers for tomorrow.
Okay, Councillor Downs, then Krinsman.
I was going to ask whether you wanted to split this into a couple of different things, including one that just targets the lowest. The one that I was most inclined to support was the restoring it, the lowest Medicare Part B and grandfathering it, but only for the lowest tier.
Let me hear from Councillor Krinsman, and then why don't we talk about how we want to divide up the votes. I think the bottom line answer is the administration has heard all of our ideas. So whatever response comes back is going to consider all the iterations, but we can take lots of votes. Councillor Krinsman.
I think you're right. I think they've heard everything, which is why I will be brief, which is to say that I didn't fully understand what the $925 was until tonight when Ms. Lemieux explained that it's essentially an incentive payment. It's not a premium. It's not an out-of-pocket, cost reimbursement. It is an incentive payment. It is a one-time, annual payment. Say, here's money in exchange for being on Medicare. It sounds to me like what I heard was that in addition to that, the changes made by the administration have saved our retirees in the neighborhood of $630. To me, that sounds like about a $295 difference. My suggestion would be that we change this resolution to reduce the Medicare Part B reimbursement to $300, which essentially holds all of the retirees harmless through all of the changes and keeps them even. And I think that would be a fair thing for us to do because I, like all of you, do not want to balance our budget on the backs of our retirees. If we were to if the administration were to reinstitute this and make the changes like the Blue Cross Blue Shield changes and the Medicare changes that have been proposed, it gives all the retirees a large bonus, which again is wonderful. And I don't have a fundamental problem with that. The problem is the overall budget. And so I think this isn't the right year to be giving huge bonuses to people, but I would like to hold them harmless. My suggestion is to take this down to a $300 Part B reimbursement payment, which essentially holds them all harmless and makes them even, is my understanding. If I've misstated any of that or if I've gotten the math wrong, someone can correct me, but that would be the intention behind my suggestion.
Councilor Krinsman, just so I understand your suggestion, would that be a $300 reimbursement that would also phase out, in other words, that it's for current retirees only and not new retirees?
It would just be to reinstitute the Medicare Part B reimbursement. I think it would be difficult for us to get into phasing it out or anything like that because, you know, as many have pointed out, the insurance decisions and the Medicare costs change from year to year. And so I don't think a resolution at this time would be appropriate to set the long-term, proposals. I think the administration always has to have the flexibility to play with numbers and balance the budget.
Okay, but I guess I still don't understand because Councilor Gentile's proposal is to reimburse those who are currently counting on the $925 to make them whole, but to not set that expectation for new retirees. So that's all I'm trying to clarify. It's fine if that's not your intent. I just want to make sure I understand.
I don't have a strong opinion on new retirees.
Okay.
So I'm the will of the council, but I would say reinstitute it for existing current retirees at the $300 level.
Councilor Bowman, you're next.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to remind my colleagues that one of the things we heard tonight, which I had not heard before when we were discussing the healthcare plan, was a significant difference in the annual maximum payment for prescription drugs. And I think we heard from Ms. Lemieux that she wasn't certain how that was going to play out. So I am a little concerned about both taking away this $925 payment and potentially leaving our retirees with potentially another $1,000 in prescription costs. So I'm really hoping that, my preference would be to say, just for simplicity, $925 for all current retirees, but obviously not make this promise for future retirees. And if we could somehow income restrict that to the lowest levels, or maybe just based on the amount of retirement income we're providing to people, base it at the lowest level. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Gentile, it's your resolution, so I'd like to just check in on how you
I
would
think
like
what's
to see the
extremely
vote proceed.
important is we know the answer to one question. How much are our retirees contributing right now for their supplemental insurance? What I'm seeing is it's $77 a month. And the analysis that was done that says that we're saving them $636 was based on $127. Maybe that's the case, but I think that we definitely need to know that because that's a big difference before we can make a final decision.
Ms. Lemieux, are you in a position to provide that information? Otherwise, if that's the case, go ahead.
No, it's definitely $120-something a month for well over 2,000 of our retirees. We have up to probably 150 or so retirees who are on these lower cost plans. They won't see much of a difference at all, but there are not very many people covered under that. So more than 2,000 of our retirees are on the Tufts MCP plan right now, which is costing them 120 something a month. They are the ones who are going to go down to $74 a month. And that's the, is that $52 or $53 a month in savings? It should be that, and that's where we get the 636. $53 a month in savings is what they will have next year. And I'm doing all of this from memory, so that's why I'm guessing on the actual dollars, but it's 120, so it must be 127 a month that they're paying in, because they'll have a $53 a month savings. And that actually, let me restate that. It's not 127 that they're paying right now. My 636 is based on us having added a 5% increase to next year. So this year they're spending 606, 20% of 606, I think. Or something very, very close to that. You should have a number that looks like 20% of just over 600.
Counselor Crossley. Just quickly, I think it might be helpful just to say that what we need is to see the math on this a little more clearly. I know you sent us something a couple weeks ago, a week ago, okay, I'm losing track of time, but the numbers we've talked about tonight are more expansive than that, especially including the, and maybe that's what you come back with when we submit one or more resolutions on this point.
I'm still going to suggest that we try to take a vote at least to achieve the spirit of where people are at tonight, because they can come back tomorrow with the benefit of this conversation with information. But I think it's going to get tricky if we, at least my sense is, I think directionally we get the point. I think directionally the administration gets the point. So if we can send the message and let them, you know, put a few more details on the dollars and cents of it, but that we can move on, since we haven't even taken up one single department's budget yet, that's going to serve us well. Councilor Gentile, I'm sorry, but I just need to figure out what we're going to do with this tonight. I mean, my own suggestion would be that we first take a vote on your resolution as is, and then we can take subsequent votes on, I have at least 3 other suggestions of plans.
Either that, or I would suggest that we might be better served if we just hold the item and just make sure that we're firmed up on the numbers, because I think it's really key.
So then, just
Whether or not
procedurally,
they're-
let me just roll the clock forward. So if we talk more numbers tomorrow night, and then we debate all these plans tomorrow night, and you get a vote tomorrow night, at what point would you expect the reply and then further action?
I mean, the following, I'm happy to go with whatever the majority of the council wants to do. I'm pleased to hear that people are sympathetic to the retirees' costs on health care. And it sounds to me like people are thinking about the lower tier only, grandfathering them in for 3 to 5 years, something along those lines. If that's what the council wants, I'm happy to go along with it. But I think it makes a big difference if we find out that currently the retirees are paying in the about $77 a month as opposed to $127. The analysis that was given to us by Maureen talks about FY 2024, and that's where the 127 comes in. But I know for a fact that there are some retirees paying 77. Now, Maureen might be right. Maybe it's a very small number, but I don't see anywhere on this handout that came from Human Resources that talks about $127. There's 3 plans, 74, 77, and 79. And I think it's really important that we get that clarified, because that's a difference of $600 a month. So,
Counselor Bowman, you had a hand up.
I was going to suggest that we vote on the resolution as is, and then count on the administration to respond to us with what the cost and implications would be of the things that we've discussed, such as restricting it to just doing it for the next 3 years and reevaluating it, and restricting it to just the lowest groups of people. They could come back to us with those numbers and have us help. But I think it would be helpful for them to hear the count of the number of counselors who they haven't heard from all of us, who are supportive of this. Because I do believe that you're correct, that this is going to be a resolution that is going to be very broadly supported, even in its largest state. That's it.
that would be fine with me. I'd be happy to accept it as a friendly amendment, and at least give something administration to react to.
I think that's a great suggestion. I think we're voting on the resolution essentially as is. Okay.
That was my suggestion.
Is that a motion to approve, Councilor Bowman?
It is a motion to approve.
Okay. Councilor Krinsman?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I agree. I think vote on this motion as is, and I think the administration has certainly heard all the discussion and can respond with any, number of variations in data or anything that the administration is willing to do. So I think a vote on this is appropriate as drafted.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve. Do we have further comments or questions before we vote? Okay. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Baker. Counselor Bowman.
Aye.
Counselor Crossley.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz.
Aye.
Counselor Noel.
Aye.
Counselor Norton. Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Albright. Motion carries 21 yeas.
Was it 22 or 21?
21.
21. Okay. Given that it is 10 o'clock, I'm thinking we probably stop here for the night, which is counter to my usual way of doing things. I would keep going.
Do you need us to hold?
So yes, I think we need a motion to hold the comptroller's budget.
Motion to hold.
All in favor of hold, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So as a reminder, first thing we're going to do tomorrow is meet as a city council and debate the free cash docket item with respect to Lincoln Elliott, where we will also have the information back on the resolution that was submitted to the administration this evening. When that is done, we will reconvene the committee of the whole, and I have to think a little bit about the most efficient way to move through the committee of the whole tomorrow night. My thinking at the moment is that we get all the responses to the resolutions and try to vote all those out, but I'm a believer that work expands to fill the time. I'm afraid that if we do it that way, we'll spend another 3 hours on the same subject matter. So I'm going to think about that a little bit. If anybody wants to give me your suggestions between tonight and tomorrow, you can tell me after the fact. Anything else? Any questions before? Yes, Councilor Kalis.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to recess.
Motion to recess.
All those in favor of recess, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we are recessed.